If you served in the British Armed Forces before the 6th of April 2005, there could be money sitting in the war pension system right now, up to £900 a month, that most veterans from your era have never claimed. Not because you don't qualify, not because the paperwork is impossible, but because nobody has ever sat you down and explained in plain English exactly what this is and how to go and get it. That's what we're doing today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what that £900 figure really represents. Why serving before that 2005 cutoff date puts you in a completely different category to a modern-day veteran, and the exact steps to take to check your own file. And stick with me to the end, because the third piece is where the real money is hiding, and it's the one thing almost every veteran from your generation has never had explained to them properly. Let's be straight about what this channel is. This is Retired UK. We're not solicitors. We're not a claims management company. We're not going to ask you for a cut of your payment. What we do every week is read through the rules that Veterans UK and the Ministry of Defence don't exactly go out of their way to publicise and turn them into something you can actually use. And I want to be honest with you right up front, because a lot of channels throw out a big number and let you assume it's one secret check waiting for you. It isn't. There's no hidden form. What this figure actually represents is the gap between what a lot of pre-2005 veterans are currently receiving and what they're often entitled to once everything is properly assessed. So let me show you exactly where that number comes from, and you can decide for yourself what applies to you. First, subscribe if you want more of this. Every week we go through exactly this kind of thing, the benefits nobody claims and the steps that put real money back in your pocket. Now, let's get into it. Start with why the date matters so much. If your injury, illness, or condition was caused or made worse by service before the 6th of April 2005, you fall under something called the War Pension Scheme. Anyone injured on or after that date falls under a different system, the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme, which works completely differently. This isn't a small technical detail. It's the entire foundation of everything else in this video. If you served through national service, the Cold War, Northern Ireland, the Falklands, the First Gulf War, or anywhere in between, and you left before that date, the War Pension Scheme is very likely your route, and it works in your favour in ways most veterans have never been told about. Here's the part that matters most. Inside the War Pension Scheme, there's a rule that shifts who has to prove what. If you're claiming within 7 years of leaving the forces, it isn't down to you to prove your condition was caused by service. It's down to the Ministry of Defence to prove, beyond reasonable doubt, that it wasn't. Even if you're claiming later than that 7-year window, which most of you watching this will be, you still only have to raise a reasonable doubt that your condition is linked to your service. You don't have to produce a mountain of contemporaneous medical evidence from 1978. You have to show it's reasonably arguable. That's a much lower bar than most veterans assume, and it's the single biggest reason people talk themselves out of claiming before they've even started. Hold on to that idea, because it runs underneath everything else in this video. So, what does that £900 figure actually represent? It's the difference between the weekly rate at the lower end of the disablement scale and the rate at the top. As things stand for the current tax year, a veteran assessed at 20% disablement receives roughly £50 a week. A veteran assessed at 100% receives just over £248 a week. That's already a gap of close to £900 a month between the bottom and the top of the same scale, before a single supplementary allowance is added on. And here's the detail almost nobody hears. Thousands of pre-2005 veterans were assessed decades ago, at a low percentage for one condition, and have never once gone back to have that assessment looked at again. Life happened. They moved on, and the file just sat there. Let's talk about the first piece, because this is where the biggest number of pre-2005 veterans are underclaimed. Reassessment. The War Pension Scheme doesn't lock you into whatever percentage you were given the first time. If your condition has got worse, or if you developed related problems that were never added to your file, you can ask Veterans UK to look at the whole picture again. And crucially, when they reassess you, they're not just looking at the one condition you first claimed for. They look at your overall level of disablement from everything that's been accepted as service-related. A veteran who was given 20% for a back injury in the 1980s and never told anyone that his hearing had gone, that his knees had deteriorated, or that the same accident left him with nerve damage is very often sitting on a file that massively understates what he's actually entitled to. Once that whole picture is reassessed properly, that 20% doesn't just creep up a little. For a lot of veterans, it moves substantially, sometimes doubling, sometimes more. The second piece is the one that catches out the largest group of you, and it's hearing loss. If you served anywhere near sustained loud equipment, artillery, armor, aviation, the flight deck, the engine room, and hearing protection standards back then were nowhere near what they are today, there's a strong chance you have a legitimate noise-induced sensorineural hearing loss claim that's never been made. Now, I have to be straight with you here, because a lot of channels won't tell you this part. Under the war pension scheme, if your hearing loss is assessed at under 20% disablement, you won't receive a pension or a lump sum for it on its own. That's the rule, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But here's why it still matters enormously. If your hearing loss is assessed alongside other service-related conditions, it can push your overall disablement percentage up into a band that does pay out. And once it's on your file, it stays there for every future review. Even where it doesn't unlock a payment by itself today, it's still a documented, accepted condition. Get yourself a proper audiological assessment through Veterans UK if you've never had one. It's one more brick in the wall. The third piece, and this is genuinely the one that's most misunderstood, is the supplementary allowances. This is where the real money tends to be hiding, because none of these are handed out automatically. You have to specifically ask for them, and most veterans have simply never been told they exist. There's constant attendance allowance, for veterans who need regular care because of a service-related condition. There's mobility supplement for those with significant difficulty getting around. There's unemployability allowance for veterans whose condition prevents them from working, currently worth well over £140 a week on its own before dependents additions. There's exceptionally severe disablement allowance for the most serious cases. And once you turn 65, if your overall disablement is assessed at 40% or more, there's an age allowance added on top, and it rises the higher your percentage is. None of these ride along automatically with your basic pension. Nobody at Veterans UK is going to ring you up and offer them. You have to know they exist and ask. I also want to mention one specific group because it's exactly the kind of thing that gets missed the way certain overseas postings get missed elsewhere. If you took part in the British nuclear testing program in the 1950s and 60s, whether that was in the Pacific or in Australia, you fall into a category where you're specifically granted the benefit of the doubt when there's uncertainty about whether a condition is linked to your service, regardless of how long ago that service ended. If that's you, or if you're watching this on behalf of a father or grandfather who was there, that's a conversation worth having with Veterans UK directly. Now, I want to speak to two of you specifically because I know you're out there. The first is thinking, I already tried this years ago and they turned me down. Listen carefully. There is no time limit on making or remaking a war pension scheme claim. A decision from 15 or 20 years ago was made on the evidence and the assessment available at the time. If your condition has changed, if new conditions have developed, or if you simply never had the full picture looked at together, you are entitled to ask for that review today. An old no is not a permanent no. The second is thinking, I'm in my 70s. Is it even worth the hassle now? Yes. Genuinely, yes. This is tax-free money, paid for life, and it doesn't stop the moment you decide you can't be bothered chasing it any further. And if something happens to you, having your conditions properly documented and accepted as service-related can directly affect what your widow or widower is entitled to afterwards. Doing this properly isn't just about you. It's one of the most practical things you can do for the person you'd leave behind. So, here's exactly what to do with all of this, step by step, because a benefit you don't act on is just a number on a screen. Step 1. Contact Veterans UK and get a copy of your full assessment history. Find out what percentage you're currently on, and more importantly, find out the date it was last reviewed. If nobody has looked at your file in more than 5 or 10 years, that alone is your first red flag. Step 2. If you have any condition you believe is connected to your service that isn't currently on your file, whether that's a physical injury, a mental health condition, or hearing loss, write to Veterans UK and ask for it to be added and assessed alongside everything else, not on its own. Step 3. If you've never had a proper audiological assessment and you have any hearing concerns at all, request one specifically for the purposes of a war pension scheme claim. Step 4. If your percentage hasn't been reviewed in years, or if your condition has clearly got worse since your last assessment, formally request a reassessment. Don't assume the number on your award letter still reflects where you actually are. Step 5. Ask specifically about the supplementary allowances. Constant attendance allowance, mobility supplement, unemployability allowance, age allowance if you're over 65. Don't wait to be offered them, because you won't be. Step 6. Get free independent help. The Royal British Legion, SSAFA, and the Veterans Welfare Service will go through your file with you at no cost, and they know exactly which questions to ask. You should never need to pay a claims company or hand over a share of your payment for this. The official guidance on this is blunt. You do not need a solicitor to apply. Here's the whole picture for anyone who served before 2005. The rules work more in your favor than most veterans realize, because the burden of proof is often lower than you'd expect. Reassessment can bring together conditions that were never looked at as a whole. Hearing loss is hugely underclaimed, and the supplementary allowances sit there unclaimed year after year because nothing about this system is automatic. Veterans UK doesn't call you when your circumstances change. Your file doesn't update itself. You served this country before 2005, and this country has had decades to get your file right. For too many of you, it simply hasn't. So, take step 1 this week. And if you know another veteran from your era, and you almost certainly do, send them this video because the chances are good they're leaving money on the table too, and they've got no idea. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.